it's interesting that a lot of us are connected with churches. I think all of us in this group. Sorry, Rod. We're all Christians here. Can't help it. But and part of it is churches. Part of the reason we create institutions is to manage. Churches often fill in where other institutions are not there. And in the case of Daniel, the question really isn't money. So Daniel showed up and I knew he needed money, but I've lent Daniel money for 15 years now and he always pays me back. He just have to wait until he gets his next check from the government. And I have sort of a spending limit on him. As he got out of the hospital a few days ago, which I was able to discern. Yeah, your mic, Luke, is a really sensitive mic. Because I've known him so well, I can ask him the right questions. I can intervene on his memory because he doesn't have one. And then I lent him $40, and I know exactly where that $40 is going to go to. It's going to go to pot, scratchers, and beer. That's where the $40 is going to go to. He gets his food from the dumpster at the supermarket, so he doesn't need food. And he uses beer because he drinks beer 24/7 to sort of keep his bipolar kind of regulated. And so he stays sort of slightly buzzed all the time. And that's how he tries to manage his mood disorder. And so the question with a lot of people in the United States isn't really money. And when the question is money, it's usually a bigger thing than the Church Benevolence Fund can handle. And it's also a question of someone needs help with rent every month. And the church is this institution the church is sort of the institution of the gaps. And it leverages community to do something like that. But then when someone comes along with a need that is specialized, let's say a substance, and Daniel actually used to be a drug and alcohol counselor, which is another irony of this case. Very interesting guy. But when something comes along that the church recognizes, another machine/institution manages this, we're going to send you to a 12-step program, or we're going to send you to a counselor, or we're going to send you to a social worker or a government agency, or we're going to call the cops. And so what we have is this extremely complex, large machine, as Paul Kingsnorth would call it, which is sort of managing things. And increasingly, the church sort of emerges, and we see this emergence and recession in churches. The church sort of emerges when the machine isn't working so well. And because religions are so broad and so old and so deep, I've been doing a lot of thinking about the Iranian revolution lately. The religion sort of comes on and sort of fills in the gap until other new systems can be taken, and then those systems get reevaluated, on and on and on. I would, with respect to the church as both the institution of the gaps and church as the universal basic institution, so many of our institutions in the modern world are spin-offs out of the church.
Yeah.
The way democratic government is a spin-off out of the church. Hospitals are spin-offs out of the church. Social welfare is spin-offs out of the church. Now, there are older institutions such as family that are older than the church. And I'll just put a little note on the personal responsibility at the top of the hierarchy. It is Jesus who, to the person who says, I'll follow you, but first let me bury my father. And Jesus says, let the dead bury the dead. So Jesus has a tremendous amount of nuance with respect to things. And in some ways, just like you said, Ian, Jesus is really tricky in that he puts himself at the top of the hierarchy and at the bottom of the hierarchy, which again is something that Peugeot mentions a lot, and has trained us to do the same thing. When the great leader of the nation comes on the mass communication machine and says, I am the servant of all, he's taken this page from Jesus. And so I think part of what happens with these institutions is that the church is this bigger vessel Now, when I talk saying the church, I don't mean the Roman Catholic Church, or I'm talking this sort of church as Christ. And so that when the machines that the church spun off sort of start to break down, then they sort of go back into solution into the church pot, and churches are probably going to boil out a new machine to continue what churches had done. And because what happens, as you said, Ian, that these machines, not unlike kings and fathers and those kinds of things, they get gunked up over time. They're no longer shapen. And so something comes along and the machine is abandoned or destroyed. And then new machines and institutions have to be created, and that are a little bit better than the previous one. But in almost every iteration, there are some benefits to the previous machine that the new machine doesn't have. You know, I can't really hug my car the way I could hug a horse. And the car doesn't really know me in the way that the horse knew me. But cars beat horses all over the place, generally speaking, but then the horses remain around the fringe. So you know, it's sort of a way of seeing this ongoing evolution and understanding the church as part of that story.